Hey everybody, how are you? It's a tough day for people who love sports video games. While to some degree there's been a renaissance of sorts with the launch of the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, we've had some really strong outings in the sim sports world with the launch, and the upcoming fall sports calendar looks pretty strong with new Madden, FIFA, NBA 2K, even Pro Evo. Adding to a strong showing from MLB The Show, at least on the PlayStation 4, today's news about NHL confirmed some of our biggest fears about sports games in the next generation. So we are here. We have got an absolute legendary all-star panel here tonight to talk about the specifics about NHL 15, the announcements today, what it means, to talk a little bit about what it means to each of us personally, what it means to the larger contingent of sports game fans out there, and also maybe a little bit what it means on a large scale to just sports video games. So we're going to go in a lot of directions, but first I just want to go around the horn. We have with us tonight Mr. Brian Weedeye from Pasta Padre, Chris Sanner from Operation Sports, Pete Dodd from Dodd Scientifics, Samit Sarkar from Polygon, TJ Lauerman from That Sports Gamer, and I'm Rich Grisham. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. It's going to be a very interesting night. So let's start off, just go around the horn. Chris Sanner, you're on Operation Sports. You had some extensive discussions today with Sean Ramjack, the executive producer of NHL 15, which we'll get to in a little bit. But before we do any of that, what is your reaction to the fact that NHL 15 will ship without several significant modes that are beloved by the community? And I think you're muted, Chris.
Wow, he's really into it, whatever he's saying.
Yeah.
This is a fantastic start. Fantastic start so far.
All right. Well, let's.
I feel the enthusiasm.
Yep. Until Chris comes back, let's start with you, Brian Weedeye. Give me your initial reaction to the news today.
Well, I don't want to offend Chris because he's going to think I'm talking over him right now. It looks like so, but today was really, it was more about acceptance than anything else, because we've known essentially for a week this was coming. It's not the shock it would have been otherwise, but it's also a little bit about contemplation and how EA really handled this situation, any long-term damage that they might have done to the brand. The news should have been disappointing, not anger-inducing, but with the way the customers were treated, and they are essentially like the most dedicated ones, their anger, I think, is justified.
Pete Dodd, same question to you. Your initial reaction to the confirmation that several key modes have been removed from NHL 15?
Well, I guess I was a little bit more out of the loop than everyone else, because I only thought that it was going to be EASHL and possibly GM connected, but to hear that there's no online team play, that there's no sort of the create a player, I forget what they call it in that specific game, that is a large number of modes that are missing, and that surprised me more than anything, because like Brian said, we kind of knew the EASHL thing was coming.
Yep. And to be specific, I should have said it. The modes that are officially out are GM Connected, which is for online leagues, EA Sports Hockey League, which allows for seasons of team-up players, multiple players, OTP, which is just online team play, as well as Live to Life. So those are all gone. Samit Sarkar, your initial thoughts upon hearing the significant reduction of modes in the next-gen launch of NHL 15?
I'm super disappointed, just like everyone else. As Brian said, certainly we saw this coming with all this radio silence for months, really. I mean, they had only ever talked about gameplay and presentation, and this late in the schedule, it was pretty apparent that they weren't going to have much to say about the modes that were going to be included, because why else would they have waited this long? What I will say is that for me, I certainly they both hurt, especially because these are modes that have been in the game for that the last generational transition from PS2 to PS3. That EA wasn't prepared. That they were scrambling just to get a game up and running and be able to ship at some point. And we heard this time around about the much ballyhooed EA Sports Ignite engine and how that was going to allow them to be on track, and they were going to have all these shared learnings between the different teams that make all their sports games. And then NHL even further took the year off, but they didn't launch on the new consoles last fall. So I think everyone had really assumed that they were going to bring the entirety of the game over because they had that extra time to make the generational transition. Now we're hearing, they've only had 12 months to build this game because they spent all of last year working on NHL 14. So that's, I think, is what really that's what's really disappointing to me is, that they had all this, whether it's realistic or not for fans to think that way. That's what I think as fans would expect, that because they had this extra time, they would have been able to do it, and so it's particularly disappointing to hear that these modes won't be in.
Again, same question to you, TJ. Obviously, we've been discussing the potential of this on last week's Press Row podcast, the audio. We had an extensive discussion worrying about it. Today it was confirmed. What did you think when you finally got the news?
Well, as someone who only really plays 3 modes in NHL, Ultimate Team a little bit, EA Sports Hockey League, and GM Connected, I hearken back to the legendary words of none other than Meatloaf when he said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And I probably could have lived with having 2 out of 3 of those modes, but only having one, and Ultimate Team being the one I had played the least, it's a real heartbreaker to me for the NHL game to not have half the modes that it had on the last generation of consoles.
Yeah, personally, this hurts for a number of reasons. Number one, it's of all of the online leagues that I have been looking forward to this fall, and obviously our Madden League is a big thing. We're hoping NBA 2K has a better online association than they did last time, but NHL was the one where I think we were going to have the most excitement around because it's a new experience. The game itself looks and plays so well. So to not be able to do that personally is a problem. Obviously, the lack of EA Sports Hockey League, EASHL, is a major disappointment to many, many, many thousands of people. But I personally, I can't pretend to be personally upset about EASHL. I have played it. It's great, but I'm not big into EASHL. I'm an online leagues guy. But really where it comes down for me is I'm a very positive guy. I try to not be cynical. I try to sort of look for the silver lining in a lot of these things. But what really kind of guts me, not just about NHL 15, but about sports games in general in the next generation, is that Hockey Ultimate Team is in. And EASHL, GM Connected, Live the Life, OTP are all out. That is the most cynical piece of it. And it's very difficult for me to personally reconcile how Ultimate Team magically makes it in and all these other modes make it out. Now, I understand from a business perspective, Ultimate Team is a revenue generator. And an EA Sports game coming out without Ultimate Team at this point, frankly, is unheard of. But I can't help but just look at that fact and be most disappointed by that. So, Chris Sander, you spoke at length with Sean Ramjag Singh. He did an interview tonight on Operation Sports, lots and lots of questions. You spoke to him directly. What is his overall message, and how does he sound to you? I've spoken with Sean a bunch of times. He's a good guy. He loves his hockey. It's got to be a tough time for him, I would think. Give me your perspective on that whole situation.
Strangely enough, excuse me. Strangely enough, he was very upbeat, Rich. I mean, he was very much. I guess the best way to put it, he was very optimistic, very confident in the game they've developed. I mean, he kept going back to the fact that he really and truly believes that the presentation and gameplay in this game is phenomenal enough to offset the cost of what essentially amounts to the online experience of NHL. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's what's missing from this game. And I mean, they've looked at the data. He hinted at it, but he didn't come out and say it. But they don't feel like it's going to be a huge problem for them long term if they take a year off from the online mode. So, but the big thing is that his message was that they have built a foundation. They have set a foundation down that they feel like they can build off of and really create something special. Now, will they? That remains to be seen. My problem is that, and I think what everyone else's problem is going to be, especially those who enjoyed EASHL, etc., is that if they plop in the game and it feels very similar when you have Sean saying that basically this game's going to be completely different from a gameplay and presentation standpoint, if it feels similar, plays similar, then the rest of the package is not good enough to support that. I mean, if it's a very similar experience. So they've got a problem this year, at the very least, with that, and I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic in the coming weeks to see how they do that and how the product works through the fact that there's going to be a large section of people who are unhappy. I mean, obviously OSers are mad, there's a lot of people angry, but the people that are not upset about this are the people who play single player. I mean, there's a chance Be a GM is actually stripped down. We have not got an actual direct answer in that. It seems as if he hinted at that they were going to be adding features back, which means there are features taken out. But if you're a single player kind of guy, I mean, you kind of saw today's news and shrugged your shoulders and moved on. So it's interesting, but he sounded upbeat, Rich. I mean, he really did, and I think that's because he really believes that the gameplay and presentation is at a level that they're going to make up for they're going to win a lot of hearts and minds.
It's really interesting. It wasn't that many years ago, probably about 4 years ago, that I really didn't play online sports games. I did not enjoy the experience of playing random people, online leagues. I wasn't in a terrific community. So offline sports games, that was how I played virtually all of them. Fast forward 4 years, ever since I joined the 4-string Madden League, and then the press row and the 4-string community, and then getting much more involved in Operation Sports, I now have a wonderful ecosystem of friends who love to play these online sports games. So I completely understand it from a single game perspective. What's interesting to me is that these new consoles are all about online and connectivity, and yet NHL 15 seems to be retreating dramatically into a much more of a single-player focus. Brian Weedeye, we were presented this past fall, with a set of sports games that were, for the most part, feature complete. Certainly from EA Sports, with a couple of small modifications. FIFA and Madden launched feature complete with the previous gen. Is it fair, as a consumer, Brian Weedeye, to have expected NHL 15 to match feature for feature as well?
Oh, I think so, and they didn't. The NHL team really didn't do anything to dispel that idea. If you look, and I pulled a couple interviews from the last year. Here's one from just a month ago, where Sean was asked about the extra time they got to produce NHL 15 because they didn't put NHL 14 out on the Xbox One and PS4 last year. It's the first question in this interview with Yahoo Puck Daddy, and essentially his answer is longer than this, but it ends with, by not being there for year one, we were able to let the FIFAs and Maddens of the world kind of figure out the technological hurdles so we can spend more time focusing on the features for NHL 15. This was July 18th of this year. So I have to question not just what they're saying now because of that. Because they knew at this time EA Sports Hockey, at July 18th, they knew EA Sports Hockey League and GM Connected we're not going to be in. Now they've said they've continued working on trying to get an online team play in for this year, but they knew this much at that point. because we also know they sent out the covers, they had the achievements done for the game at that point, so they knew these things weren't in, but they were still kind of trying to raise those expectations of, we've had extra development time, this game is going to benefit from it, and I thought it was reasonable for people to expect that much, and certainly, especially when you look at the FIFAs and the Maddens of last year, that really, they might have lost a few things in the process, but nothing huge. Certainly nothing of the magnitude that NHL has lost in this transition.
So, Pete Todd, we don't know the specifics of the makeup of the development team for NHL 15. We can assume, or we can hypothesize, that the number of people making NHL 15 is not as big as the number of people making FIFA, and probably not as big as the number of people making Madden. So, with that assumption, should there have been different expectations set? Because I would imagine that EA sort of had an idea that NHL 15 would be a very different size and scope than the launch FIFA and the launch Madden. Should expectations have been set earlier differently for the smaller but very dedicated NHL community?
That's a great question, and I think that they could have explained that. They could, we know that NHL sells less, right? And so it's going to get less resources and all of that. But at the same time, and this is something that, as a sort of like consumerist site that we're focusing on, that should also come across in the pricing. The fact that this game is going to cost the same as Madden, which has all of the modes, and this has like a third of the modes, is ridiculous. But the industry is stuck on this. A game is either $60 or it's $20 or less. And this NHL, to me, feels like it should be a $45 or $50 game because it's missing key features that are available if you want to play it on the 360.
So, Samit, you are a big NHL fan. I know that we have been talking about you participating in the Press Row, online league. Do you think ultimately that this is a significant strike against NHL, or do you think that, to what Chris was suggesting earlier, that the NHL team, their either explicit or implicitly stated opinion that the gameplay, the presentation, the strength of what is in the game will ultimately overcome the current outrage with certain areas of the community about what is not in there?
Well, what I will say is, even if you take Sean and the team at their word, which what they said in the interview with Chris at OS was, we didn't decide until today, which was, I guess, their beta date, because the game has to be feature complete at this point. They didn't decide until today that these modes weren't going to make it in until launch. Even if you take them at their word, it's still, again, what Brian mentioned. They had been sort of, I think, ramping up people's expectations by mentioning that stuff, saying those kinds of things about the development time they had, and also not saying anything about the modes at all. Every time I asked Sean, I talked to him in mid-July as well, and he was like, "Oh, info on the modes is coming. Just wait." And so the thing with the modes here is that certainly, as Chris pointed out, regarding what Pete was saying about the price, look, if you were a single-player gamer, it doesn't so much matter to you. I didn't play much of NHL 14, so I'm not sure how big a deal the Live the Life stuff is, but there is still a Be a Pro mode in this game on the new consoles, as far as I'm aware. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been on vacation this week, so I did read the blog post and the interview that Chris did. But as far as I'm aware, you still have the single-player suite of modes without the Live the Life stuff, and you've got Be a GM in some form at this point.
One team only, offline only. So yeah.
Right. But then now they're saying there's going to be patches, so who knows what kinds of other things that they may be cutting, or things like that. So to say all that and now answer your question, Rich, I think the presentation stuff and the gameplay stuff is all huge because the presentation, especially as we've hammered on the Press Row podcast, is an issue that's been as an area of the game that's been stagnant for years and years, and it's nice that they are bringing Doc and Eddie to the last gen consoles as well this year. I don't know that that's enough to get people to buy this game if they are people who really love those modes that are cut. And to explain that, fundamentally, great gameplay is the most important part for any game, and that's why people can still play NHL 94 because it's a ton of fun, and as long as people don't abuse like the drive-by and the exploits and things, they can still play a game that's 20 years old because of great gameplay, and so that's all well and good, but the people who play these kinds of modern sports games, the ones who invest hundreds of hours into these games, people like us, people like Kat Bailey, who's not here, I know she plays hundreds of hours of Madden and FIFA and NHL. The reason they play that long is because they get engrossed in these modes, in these long-term modes that are designed to keep you playing for months and months after the release date. And at this point, I've come to expect that experience from all of my sports games, and I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to keep playing for months and months in just to be a pro, or in just online versus play, or whenever they end up adding online team play, maybe that will help. But I think it's a real blow, and it's after promising all this stuff for year one on the new consoles, to then hear the NHL teams say this is the foundation and we're committed to EA Sports Hockey League and we're going to bring it back in the future, that may not be enough.
One of the things that drives me crazy is hearing the word, we built a great foundation. We should be past that. And every game should have a great foundation. I don't want to pay full price for a great foundation. I want to pay full price for a great experience. One of the amazing things about FIFA, and FIFA doesn't even have online leagues, which to me is the biggest reason I don't play it more, right? But one of the amazing things about FIFA is FIFA has something for everybody. If you just want to be me or Pete Dodd and be terrible at FIFA in the privacy of your own home, you can do that and score 2 goals in 8 matches, right? Or
on top of the table right now. By the way.
Or you can be TJ Larriman and you can be dedicated to like pro clubs, right? Or Samit Sarkar, who loves being that single player, career mode, not involved in a team, right? Or you can be Brian Weedeye and you can throw yourself into online seasons and win championships. You can have vastly different experiences. When I hear great foundation for a new game in 2014 on these consoles, that drives me nuts. TJ Larriman, should we be accepting great foundations at $60 price points at this point in time?
Rich, I'm very glad you asked me that question. You may remember mere months ago when we were also given another game that had a great foundation, and a man named Rich Grisham made a man named TJ Lauerman buy that game digitally on PS4. Everything that I saw in that interview today, great interview, by the way, Operation Sportscast. I felt like if you just copy and pasted, if you just went to an NBA Live interview and just took out NBA and put in NHL, it felt like they were saying the exact same thing. Yeah, it's great. All the modes aren't there, but the gameplay is amazing. And look what happened when they came out. And it's very disappointing after the big push at E3 from last year from EA Sports was all these games are going to be feature complete when they come to this console. We noticed, or we knew that we screwed up on the last generation when we came forward and didn't have the franchise modes online and everything. And with this title in particular, it seems like they're completely repeating all the mistakes they made in the last console generation. So hopefully I don't make a $60 mistake again, Rich.
You know, you bring that up, and yet you're completely wrong. You have that entire story wrong. But we're not going to get into that right now.
Yeah, Chris Sanner, Hangout, we could probably look it up.
We could probably look it up.
To the videotape.
Chris Sanner, Electronic Arts is very, very good at looking at analytics, right? They know how people play their games.
Yep.
They made the decision, I'm sure it came from extremely high levels, to not allocate the resources to build out EA Sports Hockey League, to build out GM Connected. Is this a sign of the future, where, you know, the modes that are not wildly popular are just not going to see the investment, even though they do offer that different experience for different people, even for someone like yourself who plays FIFA with a division, you know, with a championship level squad that no one but you actually has even heard of.
That's true, Rich. That is very true. I do play with teams that no one has ever heard of in FIFA. But no, EA actually today, one of their comments, actually in the interview, I was very displeased with one aspect. I did not ask them anything about GM Connected, so I went back, double backed, and asked them about that. And they said that it does. No one plays it. I mean, like they literally is one of the least popular modes in the game. And so they said, I can see Rich just crying over there, but that's what they said, and that is, I have no doubts that that's true. The same thing with EASHL. There is a lot of people that do play it, but in the big scheme of things, compared to be a GM or be a pro, I guarantee you that while that community is dedicated and the most hardcore, if they're just going by numbers on how many people are playing these are the modes we're focusing on, or what modes are making us the most money, which obviously has to be the case with Ultimate Team. That's where you're going. But I think the good news is that we might be beyond these kind of decisions going forward, because I would think you're not going to have to make decisions between modes and gameplay in the next 5 years. Hopefully, I think that those decisions are probably behind us now, and the question now is, unfortunately it might be, how can we make the most money out of these modes? That's the scary future that I'm worried about. Not that we're going to lose modes, but that we're going to lose access to certain parts of modes, aka NBA 2K, virtual currency, my GM, need I say more? So that's more what I'm worried about actually going into the future, is what kind of monetization options are these companies going to start putting on top of your $60 purchase to get what you used to get for $60.
Brian Weed, I'm going to come back to you in a moment, but I know, Pete, you've got a comment that you want to make regarding the analytics.
Yeah, the thing that, like, I understand why companies use analytics, and I think that they are a good tool, and they definitely give you part of the story, but what they don't tell you is how many of those people bought the game just for that thing. So that's what they're going to find out right now by removing these modes, is like, okay, yeah, like only 10,000 people play EASHL, and then their numbers go down that much times $60. That's a lot of money, and if they don't make that back through Ultimate Team, they made a poor decision. So, like, analytics, I get looking at them, but they don't tell the full story.
So, Brian Weed-Eye, if the analysis is true, if the numbers are true, and let's say less than 3%, if some of those numbers that Chris is saying are accurate, less than 3% play some of these modes, does that matter? Will the sales, the overall the overall success of this game from a revenue perspective even be impacted, to any extent, to a small extent, or to no extent. If you look around here, we're all sort of freaking out about it with level heads. But I mean, ultimately, will this make a dent in the sales, or will NHL 15 be fine?
Well, EA Sports Hockey League is a much greater percent than that. So when we're talking about small usage, yeah, GM Connected falls into that. EA Sports Hockey League is not just also about the numbers, it's about the community and the experience it creates for people. There are giant communities built just around this mode, and those people, many of them, buy solely for that mode. Like Pete was saying, that makes a big difference. And if you didn't, if you wanted to doubt the impact of losing EA Sports Hockey League, look at the way people have reacted in the last week. Look at the giant thread in the EA forum that's over 200,000 views. Look at how it trended on Twitter because of bad news. This does impact sales. Absolutely, this will impact sales. Like Pete said again, though, the trade-off EA made was, are we going to make more money on having Ultimate Team than we are going to losing people because we don't have these particular modes? And they went with what they thought their numbers showed. But that's a short-term, really, way to go about it, and it could hurt them beyond just this year because they've damaged kind of a sense of trust that had been there. They've damaged relations with these people, and this group that loves EA Sports Hockey League in particular, they are the core buyers of this game. They're the ones buying it every year. The Ultimate Team people, I think, are more flaky than that. I don't think you can rely on them for the next 5 years, next 10 years. Who knows what's going to happen with TJ and his Ultimate Team. He's going to burn out at some point. You can only spend money on cards so many years, TJ, before even you, I think, are going to be like, I've dumped tens of thousands of dollars in Ultimate Team. I can have a half a show for it. I don't have anything. They make me start over every year.
That's why I play WWE Supercard now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it's gonna hurt because those people also, the way they've been treated has been really poor. So those are the people who really get the word out. They spread word of mouth, whether it's positive or negative. We talk many times about how some of these publishers they'll look for the short-term gain, and they'll neglect the core consumer of their product, and that hurts them in the long run. And it may take a couple years. In this case, you're going to see a drop-off this year. And once people stop playing, many of these people have cited they've been playing for 8 years, 10 years, 15 years. Once those people stop playing, there's no guarantee they're coming back.
So, Samit, Sarkar, NHL is popular. It's a popular video game, but it is certainly not of the level in sales of FIFA or Madden. Chris Sander, you mentioned it earlier, and it's certainly something that I'm going to be speaking more at length, and we'll be discussing quite a bit on the Press Row podcast as we move forward. And as I'm sure Brian and Pete and Chris, you'll also have lots of different articles and analysis on this on your respective sites. But Samit, is monetization of every mode really the only way that these kinds of modes are going to exist? I mean, is it really going to turn into, okay, it's a $60 just to get in the door, and then if you want to play online leagues, you got to pay, or if you want to play, the pro clubs or the EASHL or whatever the variant is, you got to pay? I mean, is that where you think this is going?
Well, I certainly hope not. We haven't had an indication that things are going in that direction, I don't think. I don't know that what's happening with NHL this year is an indication of that either. I think this was a development resources thing where they had really committed to this investment in the gameplay and presentation, and then I guess kind of realized that they were up against the brick wall with the timing, and we're like, oh, holy crap, I guess these modes aren't going to make it in, and they kind of had to make a tough call with what they could lose and still feel like they were delivering a game for that people would buy, or even if it were for fewer people than normally would. I think you've obviously seen people test the water in that respect with microtransactions and modes. Certainly, we've seen what 2K Sports did with NBA 2K14 on the new consoles last year, and they're sort of walking that back this year, or at least they are offering offline versions of those modes for NBA 2K15. But specifically with NHL, I think the problem with losing these particular modes is that, as you said, NHL is a game that sales-wise doesn't do nearly as well as some of EA's other sports titles. I think I'm not exactly sure how reliable these numbers are, but numbers I've seen and corroborated by some of my cohorts here on the show are somewhere in the realm of 1 million copies or so every year for NHL. And the thing is, with a franchise like that, you live by the hardcore and you die by the hardcore, in the sense that you don't have the massive audiences of Madden, which are 3 to 4 million annually, and FIFA, which is 10-ish million annually. When you don't have that, you certainly have that very dedicated crowd that is going to buy your NHL game every year because they just love hockey that much in North America, obviously, and in some places in Europe. But because those numbers are much lower, when you take any chunk out of that, which I think is what they're doing this year by losing EA Sports Hockey League and GM Connected, you really risk a major loss in sales. And in terms of making that up, who knows? Because Ultimate Team is certainly something that's been huge for EA lately. It's doing better and better as time goes on. I think in their most recent quarterly report, EA said that NHL Ultimate Team was up 50% year over year for I guess NHL 14 Ultimate Team revenue versus NHL 13. So that's pretty good. Those numbers, that's not up as much as Ultimate Team in FIFA and Madden, but again, it's played less in NHL. So I don't think that you're going to get the sort of wholesale monetization of individual modes in the future, but I do think that it really is going to be interesting to see if they can keep Ultimate Team in, and if they can grow that particular mode enough for them to sort of make up for the losses in revenue that are going to result from losing these modes, because I think they will have a loss in revenue.
One of the things that I have been hearing from a few folks is that they are more interested in NHL this year because they've got a new PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and they're hearing all these good things about it. TJ, do you think that the opportunity has been reduced somewhat now for new folks to get this game because they are going to hear people like us, ranting about it, or are we in a bubble? And do a lot of these concerns not really going to impact some of those folks who might be like, hey, I haven't played a hockey game in a while. Here's a brand new game. I got a new PS4, got a new Xbox One. Let me check it out.
Yeah, I'm sure we're definitely in a bubble. But that's something that really concerns me. Joe Every Guy that plays GM Connected with a couple of his buddies and isn't on the internet all day reading stuff about sports video games, he's going to go into GameStop, see a copy of NHL 15 for his new PS4 that he got to play in his Madden League with his buddies. He's going to bring it home and be like, hey, there's no GM Connected in this, or EASHL, which is what we played. And that guy's going to be probably pretty pissed. Maybe return the game and just overall be angry. Maybe start a riot? I don't know.
So, Chris Sanner, again, Operation Sports, the home of some of the most rabid NHL fans. You got hundreds and hundreds of comments today on the interview. You ran a poll. I'm really interested to hear what the poll specifically was and what some of the results are.
Yeah, we've actually ran a couple of polls in the last week on the West Front page, and usually I don't want to claim they're scientific because they're totally not scientific, but they are definitely, they tend to be good precursors if you take into account the kind of the just where they're coming from. And so when you take into account they're from the most hardcore sports gamers, and you see that, you know, you've got a situation where in the polls it's very consistent where because of no EASHL, 40% of OSers are saying they're no longer buying the game even though they were a buy. That is consistent both in our old poll about 4 days ago and our new one. What's interesting, yeah, 40%. Wow. And what's interesting is that the still buying crowd has gone from 39 to 27%, which is probably just a lack of enthusiasm about the news today, that sort of thing. What's going to end up happening is that when you take into account casual gamers, when you take into account, you know, just the walk-in sales to the store, people seeing NHL and say, hey, there's a hockey game, I haven't played that in a while, you know, that sort of thing. If these poll numbers are to be believed, I mean, I feel safe saying there's going to be a 10 to 20% drop in sales with this game this year. I mean, I think that's a pretty reasonable bet at this point. So I don't think that's not going to cripple this game long term, but if they do not deliver next year, which is going to be a key year, we may be without an NHL game going forward because, I mean, it's not exactly, this series is not exactly a top seller as it is. So I think they got a year of reprieve this year, but I think next year is going to be just absolutely key for them.
So, Brian, as we have discussed, NHL's competition comes not from 2K, because the NHL 2K series has long dormant. It comes from, you know, to some degree, it comes from EA's own other games, Madden and FIFA. On September 9th, that's when it releases. A certain big game called Destiny is coming out as well. You know, NHL is sort of up against it with a pretty strong fall. With the news of today, where do you think this sort of puts NHL in that perspective of all the different things that are competing for video game dollars?
Well, as we've been discussing, there's a difference between kind of the hardcore NHL fans and then the casuals. And normally, what we've seen with other games especially on the PlayStation 4, but you can count the Xbox One in there also, is that people are desperate to get new software. Everything that comes out, even if it's The Last of Us or Tomb Raider, just ported over with nicer graphics from the previous system, those are selling way beyond expectations. So what happens now is NHL could have captured some of those people, the more casual crowd, the ones who hadn't played NHL in a few years. So what you have is this word of mouth that starts traveling, and it hurts that. Plus, people only have a certain amount of money they can spend on games. Most people aren't able to buy every game that comes out. So you have a game like Destiny, kind of a big deal. Expected to be one of, if not the biggest game of the year, out on the very same day. So even if NHL was started to generate some good word of mouth that, hey, the gameplay is really good, the presentation is awesome, it makes up, let's just say it makes up for those lost some modes, you'll still have reason to play it, you'll still find value in it. That message isn't going to get through to people because everyone's going to be playing Destiny, or everyone's going to be on their second week of Madden, or everyone's going to be 1 week away from FIFA, or 3 weeks away from NBA 2K. I mean, that is such a tight window. It makes purchase decisions so difficult for people that if there's any reason for someone to pass on a game that they're just not quite sure on, that could put them over the edge, and they'll just pass on it. Or wait for a used copy, wait for a deal over the holidays. They're going to lose the chance to pick up new people, I think, just as much as they're going to lose some of the hardcores that love EA Sports Hockey League and the other modes.
So, Pete Dodd, unlike Operation Sports or Pasta Padre, whose readers and listeners are all rabid sports fans, Dodd Scientifics is has a different community. What are the folks in the Dodd Scientifics community saying about the news today with NHL?
Pretty much the same thing that I was reading in on the Pasta Padre comments and on the Operation Sports forums. Like everyone just feels disappointed, and not and a lot of the people weren't planning on buying the game, but they just go, "That's not right." I mean, it's just another one of those things. Like EA just keeps doing things where people go, "That's not right," and and every day there's a new one, and today that was it.
Samit, you and several of your cohorts at Polygon, including our good friend Owen Good, have been reporting, regularly, kind of like what Pete was just talking about. You had the EA Access announcement, you had the No Madden demo, then you had the news break yesterday about the relatively short, certainly shorter than many people expected, amount of time that these people can play these games on early access. Is EA really? Are they really hurting themselves as a larger brand with these sort of series of perceived missteps, or is this just business as usual? Sometimes tough things happen, and you just keep on plugging away. Like, how is EA overall looking? With these different events of the last couple of weeks.
Well, a cynical person might say this is business as usual for EA, right? They are a company that people love to hate, and sometimes for good reason, I would say. It's been, I think, a rough 2014 for them in general. I mean, even not just with the sports stuff, but when you look at Titanfall, which was going to be the big thing, right? I mean, Microsoft and EA invested a ton. That was going to be the game, and it did for a time bump up Xbox One sales, notably, especially with that Titanfall bundle. But that seems to just be a game that I don't want to say it fell on its face because it did well at launch, but it's not a game that I think people are still really talking about. And I wonder if, say, when Game of the Year stuff comes around, if people are really going to remember Titanfall. And then you sort of look at the other things that they've done over the course of the year, and now with EA Access and the time limits that we've heard about, I think the value of that really starts to diminish there, because for a lot of sports gamers there was the hope that oh man, if I can play Madden for 5 whole days before launch, that sounds pretty great. Or maybe guys like TJ, man, 5 whole days of extra early access to Ultimate Team, right? Like that would have been crazy. And turns out it was too good to be true. So I think when you look at their sports portfolio as a whole, as part of their entire slate of games, it hasn't been the greatest launch on the new consoles for EA. That could certainly change with the stuff they've got coming out this fall. People are really excited about, say, Dragon Age, and I think people are excited to get their hands on Madden and FIFA, and NHL as well. And who knows with NBA Live? That's a real question mark at this point. But the tough part is that with the reputation being an issue, what Brian was saying about, kind of leaving a bad taste in people's mouths and sort of taking away any goodwill they might have built up. Early in the generation is when you really want to come out swinging and build up a good audience, a big fan base for your stuff. And these narratives can calcify pretty early on. I think you've really seen that with Sony versus Microsoft this time around, right? Give Microsoft credit where it's due. They've really been really good about making monthly updates to the Xbox One to really improve the experience there and try to deliver on what they promised before launch, and in some ways catch up to Sony with the PS4, in some ways surpass what the PS4 is offering. But even so, you still really have the narrative at this point that Sony is way ahead in a lot of respects, and who knows if Microsoft can catch up. And once that becomes the narrative, I think it's really hard for that trend to be reversed, and that could be the case as well with what EA is delivering with the sports stuff, especially because when there is competition, when there are other options, they're often a better option.
And it's funny too, because I'm not an EA hater. I really enjoy Madden. I really enjoy FIFA, NHL. I mean, I'm not one of those guys who has the knee-jerk anti-EA reactions. In fact, I think all of the, I think it's utter nonsense that EA won that ridiculous, it's not an award, but that they were, they voted the worst company in America for a couple of years. I mean, I think that's ridiculous beyond, just beyond reason. But having said that, I mean, I completely agree, Samit. It has been a rough couple of months, and you hope that a terrific Madden and a terrific FIFA and a terrific, to some degree, NHL turn that around, because we can see favor and we can see perception turn around. But boy, yeah, I agree, it has been rough. TJ, you're a social media kingpin. You tweet, you Facebook, you Twitch, you Hitbox, you just do everything possible. What's your opinion on how the EA Sports NHL in particular, their social media has handled the last couple of weeks per se, as it's become more and more apparent that this situation was growing into something less than optimal for at least some of its core fans?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in time heals all wounds. So if you tell me 2-3 months ago that all this stuff isn't in, I go, you know what, I understand you guys are working hard. By the time EA comes out, or by the time NHL comes out, I'm kind of over it. But by saying this a week before you're putting out the demo, and the day that you're supposed to have some big stream on TSN's Twitch page that gets delayed, and then now it's going to be in 2 weeks, I think that's a huge mistake. And that's the same thing with the time limits for Madden. When EA Access came out and Madden was going to be on it, say it. And then we'll get angry for a day or two. We'll be all riled up, and then we'll be like, you know what, 5 hours is good. I'm only going to play a demo for 5 hours. I can get 6 games in. I'll know what the game is when I'm done playing that. I think they just really need to get out ahead of this stuff. And, I mean, we've been waiting for a off week to take a look at all the companies, EA and 2K's social media and how they handle all that. And sadly or greatly, we haven't had an off week in a while to sit down and discuss that. So yeah, I think if they would have just got out ahead of this, maybe by a month or two, when they knew that either GM Connected or EASHL wasn't going to be in, they probably should have said something.
I think it's sorry, TJ. I was going to say I think it's interesting. I kind of considered EA's past actions when they weren't going to have features going back several years, and EA actually had a track record at one point of being probably more upfront than they needed to be about features being lost. When they first went, for example, Madden 13, when they first went to Connected Careers, months in advance they were telling people that fantasy drafts were going to be out and stuff like that, and people, yeah, they still wanted them, and EA worked to get that stuff in, and then people actually appreciated that. But EA, the important thing, like TJ was saying, is you give people the information so they feel like they can make the informed decision instead of trying to milk pre-orders until the last minute and then dropping it on people who then have to go out of their way to cancel, or in the case of EA Access, getting people to subscribe before they can have all the information they should have to make that decision for themselves. That's where people get upset, and that's why it's, again, like I opened with, this would be a huge disappointment, yes, but the reason people are angry is more so, I think, because the way it was attempted to be hidden, and now, burying it, trying to bury it with other feature news and trying to bury it at the end of a day, typical PR type moves when you're releasing bad news, and it just, I think people just want to be treated fairly, and they want to feel like they're being heard. And TJ touches on social media. That doesn't happen on social media. For the last week, all people got was ignored.
Chris Sander, you actually asked a question like this or similar to it, or the exact question to Sean. What was his response?
Well, his official response was that they did not decide this until today, so they obviously could not release news when they had no news to release. Now, we all know in the real world that's not exactly how this went down. So that's basically their justification for it is that if they would have said anything beforehand, it might have been premature. It would have led to more confusion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which from a PR standpoint does hold weight. Now the problem is that you could at least say something, even to the effect of, we will have news on this day next week, just to let people know that you're listening to them, because it was more people were shouting toward them with no answer, and that's the most frustrating thing you can have in social media today, when you're just literally getting no answer whatsoever. I mean, some people might say, they might fire back at that point, maybe a non-answer is an answer in and of itself, and people would have gotten confused and mad anyways. Well, at some point you have to treat your customers with respect. You have to give them some answer, even if it's wait until this day and we will give you the news that you're looking for. We're still working it out. That would have been better than just ignoring people altogether. For back in the summer, there were reports that EASHL was actually in the menus from, I don't know what kind of an event it was, but people were coming back saying that, that was actually part of the game and that sort of thing. So obviously these modes were cut sometime between the middle of the summer and now. Between basically that interview of July 18th and now, these modes, this decision was formally made. So, I don't know what leads to that, but, obviously the timeline for this goes back enough to where they actually acknowledged that this was going to be a 1 or 2 online player game a week ago. So, obviously they've known for at least that long that there's a problem here. At least that long. So, yeah, there needed to be something said, just from that standpoint. Now, I asked him if he would have done anything differently, and he basically said no. And that's, I hope this changes. I hope this is a good lesson for them, that you can't stay silent, because you only increase the rage as basically people get madder and madder as you sit silently and they scream at you.
Yeah, I made the mistake of clicking on that Twitch stream that they were trying to have with TSN, and the comment section of that was insane. I don't know who organized it, but all you saw was constant flowing of EASHL or Riot, interspersed with occasional
offensive. Yeah.
ASCII images are amazing nowadays, guys.
Yeah.
I will say this. I did make a joke about rioting and that sort of thing. It didn't really land. I think it's because they were Canadian. I don't know. So
I thought it meant to go play League of Legends.
Couple more things before we wrap. EASHL and online team play is very different than GM Connected, right? GM Connected is a online league or online franchise with multiple years. EA Sports Hockey League is a community-based, 6-on-6 individual players, and it keeps track, and you raise banners when you win championships and things like that. So very different things. It seems like some degree of online team play, based upon the interview you did, Chris Sander, is going to be patched in. Potentially. I don't think he committed to it, but they definitely said, we want to get this in. However, we know that FIFA 14 and the dream of online leagues is dead. I asked Santiago Jaramillo that exact question at the EA event, that TJ, you and Samit and I attended, and he said, very matter-of-factly, hey, it's a ton of work to do, and there's a lot of things, a lot of time and resources, and we've already got a big game. So GM Connected, the ability to have an online franchise, is that not going to happen? Is that dead? TJ, do you think that we will not see a GM Connected or GM Connected-like experience in NHL in the franchise moving forward?
I sure hope we get it back, because that's the main thing that was going to get me playing this year. I was super excited to jump in the Press Row League and lose to all you guys and have Cat destroy me. And without that, that's, for me personally, that's a huge red flag and a probably not buy, even if EASHL does come back in.
Samit, Sarkar, do you think online franchise GM Connected or something like it will ultimately be put back in NHL, or has that ship sailed?
Man, that's tough to say. It was really damning to see the update to that Operation Sports interview where Sean said, "Look, it's our least played mode, and we're gonna think of some kind of way to work that in the future, maybe." But when you look at, as you were saying for FIFA, the kind of investment that's required to build that kind of experience from scratch, which is, I think, what essentially they would have to do to put it in on the new generation of consoles now. I wonder if they're going to even bother. Now, the one reason I would be hopeful is that if you look at what they did for this year, they really made this huge investment on presentation and gameplay. It's for people who don't know how games are made, it's a huge deal to go out and replace your commentary and have to record thousands and thousands of new lines with new people, and above and beyond that to bring in this entirely new presentation package with the NBC sports stuff. So my hope is that if they are building this year's game as a foundation, which is how all sports games are made these days, if they have put that investment in to get in on the ground floor with the new consoles for NHL 15 on PS4 and Xbox One, that that will free up resources in the future to focus on not just improving the existing modes, but adding in things that they lost this year.
Pete, I think the difference between GM Connected and FIFA's non-existent online leagues is they have a blueprint, they have the infrastructure, they have all of the code for GM Connected. Do you think that we will see GM Connected or something like it at all in the NHL franchise moving forward?
Well, just because they have all of the code from last gen doesn't necessarily mean that translates to this gen. One of the things that worries me is that both of these games, I believe, are made by EA Canada, FIFA and NHL, and obviously it's not the same people, but there may be a sort of philosophy there of the online leagues are the least played, let's steer players away from them. Like the ones that do play them, let's steer them into other things. And that makes me nervous, just the fact that those guys are kind of like in the same building together.
Yeah, let me just add to that. We've recently had a discussion on a Hangout about NBA Live and the comments from the leadership there that Dynasty is essentially taking a back seat to other modes, and they're just taking pieces of Dynasty, putting it elsewhere, and they don't feel like Dynasty is that much of, or a traditional franchise mode is that much of a priority anymore. So I think Pete's right on in that maybe EA as a whole are there, and we've also had plenty of discussions on past Hangouts and podcasts about how, like you mentioned, Rich, with FIFA, would they be building a connected franchise mode in Madden? If they didn't have it now, would they build that now? And we don't think that would be happening. So this idea that they made those investments in the past 5 years ago, and now they see, wait a minute, we can't make extra money off of this. We can make extra money off of this Ultimate Team mode, and then resources get shifted that way. And that's not necessarily a bad decision on their part, again, when we're talking about business decisions, they're going to look at those numbers and say, we're going to make more money this way. That's an obvious choice for them to go with, but it hurts a lot of the people who have been around for years, who have been using those modes, because it's one thing if NHL 15 had come out just the way it's going to be and we didn't have NHL 14 to go off of, people would probably be fairly satisfied with that, but there's a difference between what you don't have and what you're losing. That's essentially a loss to the NHL, and it's a loss to the people who rely on those modes for the enjoyment, and it stings more that way than if if you just didn't know any better. If you have an NBA Live that's just not going to build out an online dynasty mode, does that hurt? No, not as much. It's certainly not as much as losing what you're used to and what you've enjoyed in the past.
So last question for everybody. Slight variance to a couple of you. We'll start with you, Chris Sanner. Take the emotion of today out of it. Let's assume for a moment, Chris, that you will not be receiving a copy directly of NHL 15 for review. It's just you in a store on September 9th or the week of the 9th, knowing what you know about NHL 15, the way that you were planning on playing it versus the way that you are able to play it, and knowing how strong of a core game we are expecting. You know, again, we haven't talked much about it, but those of us that have played and are seeing NHL 15 on the PS4 and the Xbox One have been extremely impressed. Samit Sarkar, you know, you came away from E3 saying it was your sports game of the show. You know, TJ and I played it in New York. It was terrific. I mean, really, really good. Knowing all of that, what does Chris Sanner do the first time he's got NHL 15 in his hand with everything else, you know, going on at that time? Are you buying it, or are you maybe thinking about it? It's down the line. Chris, you muted.
Oh no.
Wait, are we good? Are we good?
Yes.
Now you're good. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, with me, with limited finances, that sort of thing, I would be looking at NHL. I would be looking at my other hand at Destiny, and I would be going, which one of these is going to give me the most fun? I've already got a sports game in Madden that I just bought. I'm about to buy FIFA, and NHL doesn't have all these online modes, which I don't play online, so I really don't care. So I would be facing a tough decision even still. I don't play online as a hardcore gamer, so my decision is about the same as it was before. But I definitely am less inclined to buy it just because Destiny is also brand new on the shelf next to it.
Brian Weedeye, it's an extremely difficult question to ask.
Oh, Rich, your microphone has been plugged in to the wrong USB outlet yet again for too long. We discovered this before. This is a flaw in Apple's hardware. As he gets, and I don't know what Rich is going to ask. So
now, what if on the next one they just didn't have USB ports? Would that be cool? If they just
that's what they're going to take them away, or they're going to charge you for them.
If the Air came without them to start with, would that be okay?
No, now you're muted, Rich. You got, I don't know what's going on now. Rich is he's struggling now. So I think what Rich was going to ask me was, my purchase decision, how it's going to be affected. I'm guessing, and he's nodding there, so I'm going to roll with it. We had this big discussion last night about EA Access. So the irony in that is, I'll now play NHL 15 on EA Access. Is there any justification for me to actually buy NHL past that? No. I would have if GM Connected and EA Sports Hockey League were there, but that's literally a lost sale right from me because of this, and it's unfortunate. NHL, I don't have a passionate following of a team yet. Once Seattle gets a team, that'll probably be the game will become a yearly staple for me in that sense. But for now, I don't see getting any value out of that game, especially with the other games releasing right around it.
Nope,
No.
Still nothing
Nope.
much. Click the settings button and see what it says for your microphone.
So this is TJ's area of expertise.
Yeah. Well, I'll just pitch myself next. I agree with you, Brian, very much.
Thank you.
being from the beautiful state of New Jersey, there's not much going on in hockey, and I can say that because Rich can't respond. But yeah, I was looking extremely forward to playing EASHL this year. Some of my friends on Twitter were like, "Hey, we're gonna do this." I was like, "Yes, let me get in. We're gonna do this. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be awesome. We're gonna do the GM Connected." I was super excited for that. I think Rich Grisham's back.
He's
I'm
back.
Super excited for that. But yeah, now NHL's kind of dead to me. Maybe I'll do some of that share play if Rich happens to get it on PS4, which is hopefully what he does. And with even I had a little bit of hope if Be a GM would let you do multiple local players and control multiple teams. Maybe I could be a GM on Rich's game. He could share play me in, and then I could play my games, which seems really stupid, but would actually kind of work.
Hey, you know how much I hate being a GM and how much I love just playing the games. I think you're onto something there.
Yeah. So how amazing would it be if Rich is on the treadmill watching me play on his screen? That'd be pretty awesome.
You gotta be streaming that too. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah. So, go ahead, TJ. Sorry.
Yeah. So as of right now, NHL 14 is a no purchase for me.
So Pete Dodd, you are, you're running Dodd Scientifics, but you're very likely not getting a copy sent to you. I mean, your purchase decision, knowing what you know about NHL 15, a go or a no-go?
It's a no-go. I mean, it was hard to justify in the first place because it's coming out the same day as Destiny, but I would have ended up getting it somehow, sell a kidney, something, had there been a league with you guys or an EASHL group with maybe guys from my forum or something, that would have pushed me over the edge. Playing NHL single player is not something that I've done since like the mid-90s, so it's completely off my radar at this point. Even if it was a lower price point, it still would be off my radar.
Samit Sarkar, you're a big NHL fan. You've liked everything that you've seen from the game so far. Does this, again, assuming taking out, that you'll be doing a review or anything like that, just your personal purchase decision. Does the news today and what's in and what's in, what's your gut tell you your purchase decision would be, in or out on NHL 15?
I would still be in. That's mostly because I love hockey, love what I've seen in the game, what I've played in the game so far. Also am very much driven by that desire to get revenge for my Rangers this year. But that's me, and I'm a huge hockey fan and a huge fan of this franchise in general. So what I wonder actually about what's going to happen in terms of whether or not they lose sales, a related point, and Brian has brought this up in our chat, I wonder if, speaking of what we were saying about the investment and making this something to build on going forward, I wonder if you're going to see a lower uptake on the new consoles, and instead people, the hardcore fans, maybe they will stick to NHL 15 on PS3 and 360, right? Maybe they would rather pay $60 for a complete experience, even if it's on the older consoles. Maybe they'll forego the new gameplay, the new presentation stuff. They're okay with just the Doc and Eddie commentary, which is going to be present on the older consoles. And maybe if they liked the way NHL 14 played, i.e. they're not named Cat Bailey, maybe it's worth it to them if they're going to spend $60 in one place. Hey, I'd rather just get these modes where I can play with my friends online. And so I worry that could signal to EA, let's not invest in the game going forward because we've had such a low uptake on the new consoles. Well, it's like, well, yeah, but that's because you delivered the full game on the previous console. So, I mean, granted, I think it's going to outsell. The last-gen versions will outsell the new versions anyway, just because there's such a massive install base of the PS3 and 360. They've got 70 million plus each worldwide. for PS3 and 360, something like that. We've heard now Sony's got 10 million PS4s and Microsoft's got whatever 5, 6, 7 million, something like that probably. Xbox Ones. So I just worry that these decisions could do some long-term harm, and while people like me will still buy it, I wonder if even if people do buy NHL 15, they'll be getting it on the older consoles.
Yeah, and I asked the question not to try to lead anybody or make you feel bad. I mean, I'm extremely disappointed with what will not be present on the PS4 and the Xbox One, but I'm going to be very hard-pressed not to get NHL because the game itself looks so good. But again, because the way that I play sports games has changed pretty significantly, it's no longer just an automatic, absolute, yes, I'm going to get it. I'm still leaning strongly towards I'm going to get it. But just it will be, if I do, with a tinge of sadness as to what I won't be able to play with NHL 15 as opposed to what I will. But by no means am I suggesting that that people should or shouldn't make the purchase. I mean, one of the things that we've all seen today, and all the comments by everybody, is that different people have different expectations with the experience. A lot of people could care less about EA Sports Hockey League, could care less about GM Connected, could care less about online team play. They just want to win the Stanley Cup with their favorite team, and that's what they've always done, and that's what they want to do. And God bless you. There are millions and millions of sports game players who that is their core experience, and so NHL 15 will very likely deliver in spades to them. So it will be a fascinating journey. It was already going to be a fascinating fall. It will continue to be very interesting to see how NHL 15 goes. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate everybody taking the time. I really appreciate everybody watching. I appreciate the coming together of all of these great outlets and individuals. Chris Sanner from Operation Sports, Brian Weedi from Pasta Padre, Samit Sarkar from Polygon, TJ Lyman, That Sports Gamer, Pete Dodd from Dodd Scientifics. I mean, getting us all together to talk about this is just awesome. I love it. So I want to thank each and every one of you guys, and thank all of the listeners. And once again, make sure that you do what I do every day, which is go to operationsports.com. Go to pastapadre.com. Always check out Dodd Scientifics, the brand newly launched Dodd Scientifics. Go read what our good friends Samit and Owen do over at Polygon. And TJ Labman, the social media kingpin, he's always streaming and tweeting and twitching and doing all sorts of crazy stuff.
Again, those are not medical ailments. they're actual functions of communication and media. So
he is also his body is twitching also.
So thank you everyone. It's been a good, terrific discussion. Thanks everybody, and again we'll talk to you again really soon. Have a great night.